Oh, it was phenomenal because we saw this on opening day in Dolby, packed, literally packed. I think there was probably like 2 or 3 seats, and I'm not exaggerating, that were empty. Full house, enthusiastic crowd, I'll tell you. Hey, I'm Teresa. Welcome to our weekend show of Cocooncast, where we deep dive into movies and discuss all things cinema.
Hi, I'm Rebecca. Today we'll be discussing the new movie, The Color Purple.
Let's get started.
Celia has always dreamed of a better life with her sister Nettie. But after being married off to the tyrannical Mister, her life cascades further into calamity. As Celia attempts to pick up the pieces of what little remains of the dreams she once had, she has to wonder, will her community ever support her, or is she destined to be alone forever?
Rebecca, let's talk about this. This was a movie in 1985. Steven Spielberg directed it. This is not a Spielberg movie.
This is not what you're going to be expecting if the only exposure you've ever had to the story is either the book or the 1985 movie.
I was excited, but I was cautious because, again, this is a musical. But you think about Whoopi Goldberg was in the original. She was Celie. Oprah Winfrey, her big break as Sophia. Danny Glover, Mr. Steven Spielberg directed this. No pressure at all.
There's so many iconic names attached to the original.
Yes.
Considering that both forms of original media, the movie and the book, are landmark pieces of media in the culture today,
yes,
it almost becomes a question of not how are we going to adapt it, of how are we going to live up to this?
Exactly. And I've read the book. You've read the book. We both saw the Spielberg one. It's funny because I like musicals, but I always go, because this movie has some very serious storylines, so much happening. Is it going to be closer to the book? Because I know you and I were talking about the Spielberg rendition in 85 didn't actually finish Alice Walker's book.
It felt like there was a skipping point, and then you get to the end of the book.
Correct. So that makes sense that there was a big chunk. Honestly, as a musical, this felt closer to Alice Walker's tone that I was hoping for.
I know one of the other things you and I talked about is that we specifically did not reread the book.
Correct.
We specifically did not rewatch the Spielberg adaptation. I think the last time I watched it was probably about 5 years ago.
Oh, wow. Yeah, right.
I remember you and I had talked about seeing the musical during its second leg run when it was coming to
because it came out, and then 2015, 2017, it was re-released.
Yes, I remember you and I had talked about it, and then when it got nominated for the Tonys, we're like, ugh, we should have seen it.
Exactly, there went the tickets. But yeah, and I think that was the part of it, was not going in blind because we know it, but not, and like you, I didn't want to compare it. I didn't want to say, oh, well, because, you know, Quincy Jones, Oprah Winfrey, there was a lot of the same players that were producing. Steven Spielberg stepped in and was one of the co-producers as well. So this was very much a movie they believed needed to come back out again in musical form. It wasn't like, hey, we did this, what are you doing? It's, no, this story needs to be told.
I think it's actually really a testament to the production team that these original players even said, we want this to happen. It's one thing for the author of the book to say, hey, take my story, use it again. But when you have the original creative team behind the film adaptation, that says something to me.
It does to me. It feels more collaborative. The acting and the singing to me was pretty amazing.
There's one song early in the film that was actually cut before they got to Broadway. It was in the off-Broadway version of the musical, but they reinserted it in for this movie, and I'm so glad they did, because it feels like they were really taking all elements of the story that you may or may not have seen and creating a cohesive narrative.
It felt that way. It didn't feel choppy. It didn't feel incomplete, as we were saying. The music, it's funny too, because some musicals, right, when you're in the experience, you're like, oh, okay, I like it. It's pretty catchy. And then afterwards, like, I don't know if I would listen to it again. However, this is definitely, there was every song in there I really liked.
And we got multiple clappings by the entire audience.
Oh, it was phenomenal because we saw this on opening day in Dolby, packed, literally packed. I think there was probably like 2 or 3 seats, and I'm not exaggerating, that were empty. Full house, enthusiastic crowd, I'll tell you.
I always love it when our cinema community turns out to see a film, but then gets carried along for the ride. I thought that was so cool.
I was laughing because you were beside me and there was a gentleman that was beside you, older gentleman, probably, you know, grandpa kind of age. And he was talking to the movie at different points.
Women at this table have lost their minds.
Now you're preaching.
It was definitely very responsive. I definitely heard pockets of responsiveness throughout the theater.
I would agree with
which
that.
is great because this is the kind of movie that forces you to acknowledge not only A, how the characters are feeling.
Oh, Miss Seeley. You must ain't got no kinfolk around these parts.
All I had was my sister.
But how your responses would calculate in this situation.
I always appreciate that because here you and I are like, oh, well, this is how we felt. How did other people feel about it? And as you said, the musical numbers received a ton of clapping, and even the dialogue, when they were speaking the dialogue, the emotion.
It's time I be free from you and then turn to creation.
I'd die before I let that happen.
Good. That's just the going away present I've been needing.
As we had reviewed Ferrari more recently, there was one scene, one person's reaction, although I do believe internally more people were probably feeling it, just didn't express it. This movie had a ton of, like, as you said, interaction. It was this very collective experience. And the story that is being told, I vacillate between how do we talk about the story and how do we not spoil it if you haven't seen it, knowing that it's been part of the collective since, what, 1982 is when Alice Walker wrote the book.
Keep in mind, Alice's work is also being reviewed by a lot of scholastic institutions
Absolutely,
too, as part of their
rightly
required
so.
course material.
Yes, and it should be. It should be. I remember reading it when I was a teenager, or a little bit, correct, because it came out in 82. I believe I read it actually in 83-ish, somewhere in that arena. However, I think even had I not read the book, even if I had not seen the Spielberg rendition of 85, I don't think I would have been lost.
That was another important thing to me that I know you and I had discussed on our way back to the studio, was if you had not followed the original,
correct,
would you be lost?
And I don't think people would be. Would you agree with that?
I definitely don't have many questions. A lot of the questions that I have are just for, I want to know a little bit more about the characters, and
Correct.
that may not have been addressed in either adaptation.
It didn't feel long. It felt about the right pacing. It felt like it moved through. There were certain numbers. I know the actress who played Sophia Danielle Brooks, she was incredible. And Oprah Winfrey had originally played the role. But my understanding is she played this in the revival. She played the same role. And to me, she just blew everyone away. Plus, her character was so emotionally moving when she spoke versus when she was singing.
That's a lot of women. You seem like trouble.
Now I come here out of respect. But if there ain't none to get, there sure ain't none to get.
Man, the supportive actress race is definitely going to heat up. We've got
Absolutely.
Cara J. Myers from Killers of the Flower Moon.
Oh, correct. Yes.
And now we have another contender. Like, I want to see them go at it because both of these women made their movies.
That's a great point. Versus they played a part, which is what, obviously, right, that's what actors and actresses do. They play a part. But there's something different is when people own the part for themselves and reinvent it with the information that they have. Although I think, playing it as it was would have been absolutely fine. But it was so memorable. Even days after the fact, I'm still thinking about it. I'm still thinking about this version versus the old. Fantasia Barrino, who played Celie, blew me away as well. her evolution, it just was so powerful to go from just this young child who was pregnant early on, really, being married to the mister who was a horrible individual at that point. I just was, wow. I truly was blown away. And like we were saying, I'm still humming the songs. It really brought back how I felt about the original book.
The original book, to me, is powerful.
Yes.
Because it takes this story, which unfortunately was quite common from what we understand.
That's true. This isn't an exaggerated version. This is a reality of many people's families.
I think it's powerful because it takes this and it shows how these actions affect families. And you have Celie as our frontline character for
Correct.
this.
Yes.
You need somebody who can sell this destruction being wrought in their own lives, but also their resilience to transform and not let that define them. That's a really tough character to do, not only in a play,
Yes.
but you have to communicate that through song. And then on top of that, you have to do this in a film setting. And a film plays very different than being on a stage. You have a couple thousand people staring at you.
Correct.
Here, you're performing to an audience you can't necessarily see.
It's interesting to me what you're saying because it obviously is a musical. However, it felt like a movie.
It did. There's a cinematic quality to it. I'm
There
not just
is.
saying that because there's a movie.
Exactly, because some, as we've talked about on Cocoon Cast, there are some movies that feel like a play, and some that felt like, gosh, they never were able to do the translation. It's like a camera following you around on a stage versus the set design we were talking about. It was filmed in one location. However, there's a house, they're in a street, they're in a different house, they're on the road, they're in the field, they're all these different places, and every single place felt so genuine.
It felt like a world that you were following these characters
Exactly.
around.
It felt like a total world. That's a great way to say that. I know the part that really stood out for me is twofold. One is you were talking about it was very positive.
It's rough, but it's positive.
It's rough, but it didn't feel hopeless.
Put it on. This ain't me. Hush. We need to look like we belong. Let's see this smile and color. Sweet and loving God.
Even some of the darkest moments
Yes.
still had a tinge of hope to them.
My sister, and I ain't seen her in years. You know, if you ain't gonna laugh, you need to sell your footy bone.
I appreciated that. The screenwriter, Marcus Gardley, I really like him.
You were so happy. I know you were frantically Googling him after the movie.
I was. There were so many wonderful themes. It's weird, as you said, the themes were heavy, but there was a certain amount of levity. The writing to me was just, wow, I really, really like the writing a lot. But the other part that I appreciated are the themes, right? There was a forgiveness theme. There was a redemptive theme. There was future and hope and reconciliation. There were so many wonderful themes that didn't feel like I was hit on the head and say, no, pay attention to that. But it added to that. And you think about if, as a person, if I internalize that or if I experience those, I will be a changed person. I will be bitter or I will be better. And every character in there, despite horrible adversity that you and I can only imagine, came out better. Every person.
There's one person, and I'm thinking of the main villain that we encounter midway through the piece. They have a more prominent part in the book.
Okay.
The mayor's wife.
Yes, thank you. Oh, she was, yeah,
Oof.
right.
I think we have a new contender for most hated cinema baddie. Shopkeep gal from Pretty Woman, move over.
Well, and I'm thinking, hey, Cinema Committee, comment below. Who's your favorite baddie? And I do think, I agree with you. She did not change.
No.
However, her interaction with Sophia changed Sophia. And there was almost like a nail-biting scene of how will Sophia handle this? because there were parts of it where she wasn't okay, but how she ultimately became okay. That was heartbreaking. You were saying I was about ready to cry. I was with you on that completely.
Still thinking about it right now is actually making me tear up in some
It's
ways.
heavy. It's heavy,
But it was reality too. And they
that's
presented it in such a respectful way. I know
Yes.
it's tough to do scenes like that because you veer into parody going one way or the other. And to show respect to the experiences of many other people who lived these experiences
Absolutely.
is a tough thing to do.
But it's so important. And had they not done that, the movie would have been watered down, weakened. And to me, the power is in the truth. Speak the truth. We need to know this. This really happened.
Just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean you shouldn't sit with it.
100%. And it's good for us to sit with it and be uncomfortable, to have the emotion and to feel that. That's telling the story well. Do we have any questions from the box?
This movie had some very delicate subjects to cover, specifically the rape scene, etc. How well do you think they did, and is it still accessible for different age levels?
There's always a cringe factor in my mind whenever a subject like that is brought up in a story. It's, do you need to bring this up? And in the context of the story, it makes sense. It provides a reason for separation for several characters. It provides a reason for detachment in a relationship for several characters. I thought it was respectfully done. It is still intense. It's not designed to be something to gawk at. You feel the pain of the characters and you're given just enough material to know what's going on.
I agree with that. This movie is rated PG-13 for a number of reasons: mature content, sexual content, violence, and language. Wow.
Had all of the above, definitely.
Yeah, exactly. But the restraint, I think the word restraint keeps coming to my mind because it could have been graphic, exploitive. Obviously, it was very uncomfortable and painful because you felt it. But the lack of graphicness allowed me to sit with it and feel it. And as you said, maybe younger audiences may not fully grasp what was happening. To me, that may be actually better in some ways because that maybe more people can see it because they're not hit in the face with it. But the story is still being told.
And I think it would be inaccurate to Walker's story to dismiss that.
Oh my goodness. I think it's again, back to the reality. This is the reality of what happened, and it shaped all of our characters, and Celie obviously in particular. Had we not understood her, I mean, just out of the gate, her pregnancy, she's pregnant from the beginning. She's, taken by this man. It's just, you have to know this.
Otherwise, some of her actions won't make sense. It won't make sense why other characters will immediately choose to rally around her.
Correct. And as you said, the question is, will she find community in all of these circumstances? And thankfully she did.
I'm very grateful she did. Not
Yes.
saying that I don't enjoy a depressing movie,
Sure.
but I find that a story of community can often be more powerful than someone surviving alone.
Correct. And that would be the goal, is we band together. We're better together. We talk about movies are better together. Life is better together. Do we have any other questions from the box?
Let's talk about the cinematography. Some films like this can feel a little bit more like a documentary. Being that it was filmed in one location, it can feel a little claustrophobic. How did they do with the cinematography, and what was your feeling with the film?
I like Dan Lautzon's work. Dan has worked with one of my favorite directors, Guillermo del Toro, for a multitude of films.
Yes.
Including The Shape of Water, Crimson Peak, and Nightmare Alley.
Oof, yeah.
Even Mimic, some of his earlier work.
And John Wick, from my understanding, 2, 3, and 4. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Sorry, had to do the sound effect. I love how Dan provided a lens for the audience to view this not as a documentary, but it felt like you were walking through a painting. I loved how he took time to focus in on certain like background characters that you wouldn't otherwise see. He gave a sense of scale of the musical. There's points where you literally know the entire town is turning out to see someone, and indeed you feel that the vast expanse of the town is turning out to see someone. It's a hard thing to conceptualize, especially when you're not on a stage and you don't have everybody filling every nook and corner of the stage. I think even when the small intimate moments, say 2 or 3 people, Dan did a good job of creating an emotional environment to exist in. Much like how we saw the Iron Claw, I feel like Dan did an excellent job with this.
I agree with that, because cinematography can make or break a movie, as we've seen. This was powerful, and I appreciated the fact that it wasn't a documentary and it wasn't so detached. We were talking about Poor Things earlier, and that felt very detached. This felt very intimate and close.
One of the things I want to use in conversation with this movie is passionate.
Passionate.
This is such a passionate movie. You can feel everybody giving their best, and it shows. It
shows. You walk out, you were feeling everything and more. I 100% agree with that. Rebecca, it is that time of the show where I have 5 purple moths this week. Singing, dancing, and waiting for you to say, on a scale 1 to 5, what do you think?
I'm really happy to say I'm not sending any moths scurrying this week. It's a 5 moth movie for me.
Wow, wow, wow. This is your first 5 moth rating this year.
I know, and it's near the end of the year, which is kind of sad.
Wow.
I am so glad we waited till the end of the year to get this movie, because this is the kind of movie that gets me excited about movies. This is the kind of musical that gets me excited about musicals. It does everything, and it leaves nothing to be.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. I would say your number 1 reason, but it sounds like everything is the reason.
Everything. And I'm not saying that because, it's the easy cop-out. I'm saying that is because once you see this movie, my hope is that you see everything that we are talking about.
Oh, absolutely, and more.
Preferably in a packed house.
Exactly. Best way to see it. Wow. All right. I have 5 purple moths. And I think you already know where I'm going with mine.
Yeah.
It's a 5 moth one for me, too.
Woo! Unanimous today.
I know. No moths went home. I 100% agree with everything you said. It could not have been better.
It feels love. Not only love to the original source material, you have love to the 85 version. You have even love to the original musical. They even took songs from the off-Broadway production. I'm like, yes!
To me, that could have felt thick and bloated, and
it felt natural.
It felt very fluid and natural. Natural is so great. And to me, that's the best way to tell a story versus, we talked about the hitting over the head and telling you 20 times. It wasn't that. And I love the optimism that came out of such tragedy. That's always the beautiful story to me. And the power of one. The power of Celie, and it's not, I had this wonderful, easy peasy life, and now I get to extend all of this. I've went through everything you can imagine and then some, and I'm coming out a better person. The power of one person, and the scene where they all come together, you see the power of Celie affecting each person around her.
And like I said earlier in the review, we believe sometimes that self-reliance is the only reliance.
Correct, that's true.
This communal reliance creates such a wonderful story, but it's not ham-fisted to the cheese factor.
No, and thankfully it's not. It didn't go there. I'm so thankful it did not go there.
That would have been disappointing.
I would say I would be so sad and disappointed, because this is the opportunity people want to hear and see this movie in the theater.
In Dolby, preferably.
Preferably. Thanks for joining this week. We're always excited to create experiences to bring our cinema community together.
For our upcoming reviews, we are excited to be reviewing Poor Things, and on our Movies and More weekly show, Migration.
Please remember to like, subscribe, and to share our channel.
If you enjoyed this show, you might check out last week where we reviewed Ferrari, and on our Movies and More weekly show, we reviewed The Iron Claw.
Remember, cinema community movies are better together. Thanks for watching. See you in the next review.